Welcome to the latest episode of the Skiffy and Fanty Show.
War does not finish. It's not a game that stops when enough players quit. It's a wound, sinking into the flesh, leaving scars and rot that cause pain for a long time.
I'm Shaun.
I'm Daniel.
And on today's show, we're talking to multi-award-winning... this is their self-description, just to be clear. Multi-award losing author of speculative fiction, Sunyi Dean. Welcome, Sunyi.
Thank you for having me. I did steal that joke from R.J. Barker, but he's since won the British Fantasy Award, so he doesn't get to use it anymore, and now it's mine.
Next one for you, then.
Yeah, next one. So Sunyi was born in Texas, raised in Hong Kong, and now resides in you're in France at the moment, so...
Oh, I'm just visiting a friend. It's his 40th birthday, and he's very extra, so we're in France.
Okay,
the
gotcha.
wine is.
Okay. All right, I was like, maybe there was a move before the last time your bio was written. Her debut novel, The Book Eaters, was an instant #2 Sunday Times bestseller. In her spare time, she likes buying whiskey. Daniel will be happy about that. Collecting dumbbells and... dying in jiu-jitsu. She also founded the Hugo-nominated Publishing Rodeo podcast with fellow Tor author Scott Drakeford. But today we're talking about The Girl with 1,000 Faces, which at the time of this recording I don't believe is out just yet, but is about to be out and will be out for everybody who will see this when this episode releases.
Yeah, it's out next week.
So before we get into our discussion, a reminder to our listeners to please share your questions and comments with us at skiffyandfanty.com/listener suggestions. If you aren't already, join us on Twitch for Shaun's Alphabet streams, most every Friday at 7 p.m. Central to be a part of our interactive live streaming show format. Finally, be sure to review and spread the word about our show. Help support us through our Patreon and be part of our Torture Cinema polls, live watches, and other Patreons-only events on Discord. A mere $1 US a month will give you all of that power.
It's a lot of power. So,
torture is a lot of power.
Oh yeah, torture is a lot of power. You can make us watch some bad stuff. So, actually, surprisingly, sometimes good stuff, but that's not the point of today's show. So, Sunyi, if you wouldn't mind, it says here avoiding spoilers, because I think that's important. Can you tell listeners about The Girl with 1,000 Faces?
Yeah, I can say... I've got it down, I think, to a spoiler-free sort of summary, but essentially it's a story in two parts. And the first part is set in 1975 in Kowloon Walled City in Hong Kong, which was a real place. At one point, it was the most densely populated neighborhood on Earth. And it follows a lady called Mercy Chan, who's in her 50s. She's working for a triad, which is like a Chinese gang, as a sort of exorcist. And she's trying to deal with this ghost, which is infesting the Kowloon Walled City area. And there's a risk that if she can't deal with this problem, their whole neighborhood will be demolished because it's been an issue for a long time. However, the ghost seems to know things about her from her past and things that she did in the war. And to kind of combat this problem, she has to really face some things which she's ignored for a long time. And the second part of the story is set many years before, actually, in 1942, in Hong Kong on the outlying islands, and it follows a girl and her mother who flee the city about 4 days before the Japanese invasion and occupation of Hong Kong, and they decide that they're going to go out to an uninhabited island and just avoid the worst of the invasion. The only people who live on the island are ghosts, which is why no one else is there. This is obviously a really great plan, and they just hang out on this haunted island and everything is fine, and there's like lots of beach time, and it's very happy.
Totally normal time on an island. Go ahead, sorry.
Oh no, I was just going to agree. Completely normal. The ghosts are friendly. It's what you'd expect.
Yeah, exactly what you'd expect. It's more like Casper, right? You know, like maybe sometimes they mess up the dinner table, but like everything's fine. No. So I have to ask a question about setting first, because I'll be honest, I don't see a lot of stories that have the Kowloon Walled City as a setting. And I remember learning about that like 20-something years ago and being utterly fascinated about it, because it is a wild place. It's kind of astonishing that the city existed. And so I'm kind of curious, first, sort of what interested you about that particular setting. And I suppose as you were writing that setting, sort of what makes it such a great place to set ghosts and the sort of fantastic in.
So I think I've mentioned this, and I have like an alternate bio somewhere, but when I moved to Hong Kong as a kid, because that's where my mother's from and her side of the family, and I went to school in Hong Kong in this place that was called International Christian School, and it was on a campus that was on the edge of where the Walled City used to be. So that campus has like a concrete wall and like barbed wire fencing above it, because it used to be right next to Kowloon Walled City, which is now a very nice park with a mall in the middle. And it kind of, you learn about the history while you live there and stuff. And it was just like a part of the everyday, the legacy of that. But then I think as I got older, it kind of, you find it again and again. You know, it comes up in cyberpunk, it comes up in video games, it comes up in all kinds of things. And it's just sort of seeped into like cultural consciousness, I think, for a lot of cyberpunk and sci-fi settings, even stuff like Ghost in the Shell a little bit maybe. So it was always a point of interest. And I thought, when I was sitting down to talk to my editor about what the next book would be, you know, I was very drawn to do locations. I really wanted to portray Yorkshire and the Book Eaters. I really wanted to do Hong Kong for the second one. And it was such a wealth of like interesting things going on. Ghosts in general are just like very, very embedded into Chinese culture, but obviously they're a little bit different from Western ghosts. And I knew that I wanted those two elements, I guess. So it just seemed natural to put them together.
Go ahead, Daniel. Sorry.
For the Walled City, one of the things I was curious about while we're talking about that and its history is within the novel, there's a portion of the plot that concerns political machinations to kind of basically raise it and financially benefit from that. So I was curious as I was reading that, is that based on actual historical political sort of machinations that went on over time that you researched? Because I understand you did a lot of research putting together this novel. It's in many ways very much a historical fiction kind of novel.
Yeah, there was a lot of corruption because I guess for people who don't know, the Walled City was a really difficult area. The British didn't claim it. The Chinese didn't claim it. It kind of outside of laws and the usual legal kind of safeguards, I guess. So there was a lot of corruption, and there were a lot of people that had a landlord interest in keeping it from being demolished and owned property in it. And that, yeah, there was that aspect of sometimes, you know, every time the specter of demolition was raised, the price of like land and property would change because, you know, obviously you have to compensate people who lose that. So I think that was a factor. I think it gets a mention. There's a film that's set in the Walled City, a Chinese language film that mentions that as well. And I think, I mean, it must have been widespread enough that that it filtered into those stories.
I think it might be helpful for listeners who don't know about Kowloon Walled City to remember, like, this is not a very large area and had like over 1 million people living in it. It's like something like 6 acres of land with like 1 million or something people. And I mean, that when you say densely populated, like it almost feels like we're understating how densely populated Kowloon Walled City was. And I think also, I imagine in your research, but since you had mentioned the criminal element in this story, since the main character is doing this on the behalf of the criminal element, that obviously feeds into this particular location for this first half of the book. Because as I understand it, the triads also were heavily involved in Kowloon. And I guess talking about how you sort of wove in that sort of criminal element into this story I'd be very interested in that, like the kind of research you did, and then sort of bringing that into this sort of narrative of you say sort of like exorcisms. And I'm kind of curious about the connection between those.
The triads are possibly the bit I fudge the most. They do still exist. They still operate. And back in the day, they did run the walled city fairly efficiently. I mean, it's a protection racket, but it's a protection racket that has like social care for old people and schools and things like that. I guess it's very Chinese in that way. It's quite efficient. But I think one of the characters in it was based off a lady called like Mother Snake, who is just this terrifying entity of a person. I think there's a little bit about her in the author's note where she got her start at 14, where she got knocked up basically by a triad gang member, and when he tried to dump her, she basically threatened to cut his throat until he married her, and she sort of progressed from there and had a life that was just filled with violence and husbands and revenge and bloodbaths, and she survived all kinds of things. But she was not a very nice person. So I guess the intersection with exorcism is I just wanted to take a world that was very familiar and grounded and add in like, but what if these ghosts that people believed in were real, and how would you actually deal with them? And that's not even a huge stretch necessarily. People do believe in ghosts to an extent in China. That's why actually this book would probably be banned in China. Like it wouldn't get a foreign translation because the CCP is, at least in theory, a secular organization, so you're not supposed to write fiction which promotes the supernatural. And I think something like Lord of the Rings, Chinese people kind of understand there aren't elves and dwarves walking around, but so many people do believe in spirits and ghosts, so that's a little bit more of a hard sell for those censorship laws. But yeah, people do believe in that. I was telling one of my friends the other day that street wizards are still a thing in Hong Kong. You can go to like this kind of bridge and underpass area in Wan Chai, and there are these women that will sell you curses if you want. So you can give them the name of someone that you want cursed, and they'll do that for you. However, again, since the crackdown on democracy in Hong Kong, they've lost some business because it's now illegal to curse politicians, because you can't criticize the government. So they get a lot less business than they used to, but it's definitely something that's very much still a part of people's lives and things that they still believe in.
You immediately at the start of the book, you get dropped into this setting very effectively because you get the sense of that density of Kowloon Walled City with the layers as Mercy is sort of traversing to the home to deal with the ghost that she's been assigned to deal with, and sort of just how everyone's living atop one another, and history is living atop one another. And that's, very symbolic of the novel overall, I would say, of how much we're entwined with our history and past events that influence us in the present and where we go towards the future. And then the other thing that struck me of what you were just saying is that you very early on then also established this idea that ghosts are a thing, but it's not just in the sort of Hong Kong Chinese culture. You also point out fairly early on, if I recall, that like Western society also has this belief in ghosts, but we just like banish them right away. We don't want to deal with them. We don't allow them to exist with us in any way, any time of the year, not even Halloween. But there's that. I find it somewhat ironic then that politically now China is almost like banishing that from the culture and from the people, as opposed to then Western. So it seems very ironic to me that there's kind of an actual reverse to things in terms of at least modern day political aspects.
I mean, some of that is world building laziness, where I didn't really want to have to deal too much with the impact of ghosts abroad, but some of it was cultural. In that ghosts were historically seen as like a community responsibility. Like if there's a haunting or there's a spirit that has unfinished business, this is like everybody's problem to deal with, as opposed to like ghosts are a monster and we must just get rid of them. it is kind of ironic that history is now just like locked down. I think there's an element of the way that China is now, ironically, is very influenced, I think, by those decades it went through. I think when you lose like 20 to 30 million people in a war, and you just have decades and decades of humiliation and losses and occupation from, British and Japanese and different forces and being left behind, I think that drives a lot of modern Chinese thought. And things like the Cultural Revolution, where you kind of look at it and you think, is there an element there of China going, what's wrong with us? Is it our culture? Is that what needs to change? And I do think, there's a tendency now to kind of push some of those things away as they very, very embrace the modern. I don't know, it's a strange mix because they do celebrate their own culture. It's just some of those supernatural things are tricky politically. You can get like Chinese horror stories and films, but it has to be explicitly metaphorical, kind of like, then I woke up because all of the story was a dream, right? And so it's not real. Apparently you do get a lot of Chinese language stories that kind of end like that to get around those censorship laws.
I find that very interesting because I won't profess to, a grand knowledge of this, but I remember reading that there was like a Chinese MMA fighter who would like fight, Tai Chi and all kinds of different people who like claim to be able to like make people fall over by waving their hands and those like kinds of things. And he would like fight them using MMA. And obviously he like beat the crap out of these people, just horribly, like old men, all kinds of stuff. Right. And he got in a lot of trouble because those were like traditional Chinese martial arts that he was fighting against. And it like, I guess part of the issue is that those martial arts that he's fighting against, like they may have some value in terms of their sort of like cultural history and then maybe even like physicality because you're doing lots of motions and stuff. But from like a combat perspective, they don't really work. There's a sort of element of, I almost would say an element of the supernatural in kind of what they're doing. And I don't know if you know something about that, but when you're talking about this element of how the CCP treats ghosts, that immediately seemed like a complete opposite of that. It's just that there's not like, obvious power shooting out of people's hands or something. It's instead in the physicality of it is like you're engaging with, I don't know what you call that, like chi or the metaphysical substance or something.
Yeah, I think that's probably very complicated. I think there's a lot of areas that are going to clash between China wanting to preserve its history and being very careful around the supernatural. They did have stuff like the Boxer Rebellion. I don't know if you studied that in the West. That was when like basically a group of men who believed that their martial arts made them bulletproof were like fighting against kind of colonialism and leading rebellions. And the first time they came up against guns, they just all died basically. So that didn't go well for them because you can't use, and it is weird because you do have things like feng shui and stuff like that, which are like okay. But I think it's specifically the censorship around stories and how narratives are shaped. And possibly as well because ghosts are very tangible. So in a lot of Chinese stories, you will have ghost stories where like, and then this man married this ghost lady and they had children and lived happily ever after. And you're like, hang on, what? How does that work? And I think some of that comes from like telling stories about people which didn't make sense in Chinese social context. So like if you're a married lady in the 1700s and your husband dies, you don't get remarried. You're a widow. But if he dies and then you sadly die of a broken heart a little bit later and you become a ghost and then you get married as a ghost, that's fine. That's okay because you're dead, so the rules don't apply now. And there's all kinds of really complicated social interactions going on with that.
Well, to switch to a different element of history, because the second half of the book, which you had mentioned, is set in the past and is set in I would say, an incredibly turbulent and violent period in Chinese history. You're talking about the occupation by Japanese forces in China, and you bring some of that element into this story. And so part of my question is actually about the ways in which you'd explored how sort of the past sort of almost, I hate to like do the pun, but haunts us, right? Essentially, that throughout this book, and there's sort of two questions, but that's kind of where I want to start. And there's a second question, which is about point of view, because I have to ask you about that choice. But I kind of want to get you to kind of talk about this idea that you sort of wove into this book the ways in which our past sort of haunts us, and in this case with very potent histories. These are not like, very individual, personal. They're very widespread, terrifying, horrible histories.
Firstly, I was just going to say the cat looks very cute on your shoulder.
Thank you.
Yeah. But so I think the book is, fundamentally about that. I think that people carry baggage with them through their life and they pass it to their kids. I think there's been some like research, I think, in the UK about how the generation that survived the war and being separated from their parents and stuff like that grow up to, well, in the US as well, essentially be boomers. They carry that damage into their relationships and their families, and that torch of like intergenerational trauma passes down. I think that is something that you do see in China. I think, it changed. Sorry, there's a very big dog in this house. It changed how my grandparents related to their children and my parents related to me and so on. That's a very vague answer. Sorry. Would it help? Do I need to drill it down more?
If you can, a little bit more would be kind of, I guess, maybe switch it to sort of talking about that setting in particular, the time period. Might be part of what I'm interested in too, is that particularly is like a national level, right? The World War II, the impact in China is pretty substantial. It's not I think that's kind of obvious. It's not a very minor event. Yeah.
I think, it still impacts things today. So, a lot of Chinese people carry a grudge against Japan. And that's sort of exacerbated by Japan not being very good at teaching its own history. The equivalent would be like if Germany was teaching its kids in schools, oh, yes, there was like a war, but, it was very sad. Wars happen. And we don't know why everyone is so angry at it. If they did that, it would just be... it would not make them very popular. But there's an element of that in Japan, and that's tied to the cultural sense of not wanting to lose face. So my grandmother, who I think was a very good person and very kind, despite all the things she endured in her life, she still died mad at the Japanese because she carried that grudge and that kind of bias. And I think there's a kind of, I don't know, it really shapes how people see their own cultures, and I think possibly the way in which Hong Kong people run to embrace a lot of Western things as well, because they just see that, like, I'm trying to think of a way to put this. So in Britain, people are very, very proud of the legacy of World War II, right? There's like a Remembrance Sunday, you wear poppies, and there's parades and flags. They don't have that to that extent in China, because I think China survived the war the way a house survives being gutted by fire. It's kind of standing, but is it really? And I think it has a much stronger association of shame historically than pride, if that makes sense as well.
Oh, yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. When you're a nation that experiences that level of destructive trauma, I think you could understand why it'd be a much more difficult, I think, than like the United States, which really, we have like one major attack against us, but other than the war dead itself, the US is largely unscathed by the war. I mean, other than it was uncomfortable for us, I should say, as we're going through it. And so we get a very clear sense that we're the victors, like, look at us, hoorah, we did that. But we weren't also entirely invaded. We didn't have mass atrocities committed against our people. And when the war was over, right, the United States got to say, like, look at us, we're really powerful now. And now we can build boats and other kinds of things. So I get that very distinctly. I think it's something that maybe a lot of Americans actually historically don't understand, is a lot of nations that went through World War II, like, had to deal with the consequences of that at a scale that the U.S. just simply did not, right? we got to mourn our dead, but we also didn't have to like rebuild all of our cities and all of this kind of thing, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it really set China back in terms of their modernity and how advanced they were. And I think they have only really just sort of caught up in the last 20 years or so. Though saying that, I think that they're pretty comfortably on their way to supplanting the USA as a big soft power and economic power. So I suppose they got there in the end, just at terrible cost.
So I want to circle back to the book. I'm going to steal from you, Daniel. You just have to take it, because the other question to this was, when you go back to the past, there is a POV shift to second person, and I'll admit
technically
that,
it's still first person. It's first person technically.
Well,
No
yes.
one said that before.
Right,
You were
I know.
correct. Technically,
Yeah.
the entire novel is in first-person omniscient, but I think that distinction passes readers by, which is fair enough.
Oh, okay. Thanks, Daniel. I
But
feel
it does
dumb
feel.
now.
No, I mean, that was my. We'll go into that, but no, it very much feels like second person. But yes, yeah.
Well, I guess part of the thing that I think readers will experience is, on the one hand, the book is kind of it's split into two, and so that the shift it makes a lot of sense. It sort of very distinctly cuts the book in two, but it's also, I want to say, jarring in a good way, because I wasn't expecting it, and I kind of really like when a book does something that I'm not expecting. Because it really like gets me to be like, oh no, there's something's going on here, and my main question, and then I guess Daniel will kind of follow up, would be what was the sort of impetus to do that around this midpoint of the book, to sort of switch the way that you approach point of view.
So I love second person anyway. I used to hate it, and I realized I hated it because I'd never read it done very well. And I completely changed my mind when I read The Island of Dr. Death by Gene Wolfe and thought, oh, I love this. Actually, a lot of poetry is written in second person. It's very personal. It's very intimate. But also, I came to realize that if I wanted to do an effective twist, one of the ways to do a twist where you're in someone's skin and you can kind of, you're very close to the character point of view wise, but still hiding things from the reader, is second person, because the narrator is withholding information for their own reasons, which is a very similar kind of approach that I think N.K. Jemisin does in The Broken Earth. One of the point of views is second person because the narrator is withholding information from the reader while also putting you in the shoes of the protagonist. I do think it's a risk. I do think a lot of people will find it jarring in a bad way, and there are definitely people who get to that point and just bail because they're like, what's going on? They wanted the urban fantasy, and that's like gone for at least for that part of the book. So it's a big ask, but I think just it's something that came about naturally as a course of rewriting so much and writing in so different ways. And I think when I originally envisioned it, I had this idea that the book would feel like you're just going down levels, like you're being dragged further and further underneath the water kind of sensation. Hopefully that most people can keep up, but it is a bit of an ask. But if you're going to try and write something different, you might as well go all out. So
I love it, just to be clear. Like I said, right, I like when a book challenges me a little bit and pushes me in a way. I just like when authors do that, because you could just tell this book in one point of view, but I think it's made better by doing that shift. I think the book becomes more interesting and it makes you pay attention.
Thank you. That's very kind. I do think outside of genre sci-fi and fantasy and into the more mainstream books, you see more of those kinds of structures, and I always like them. So I think increasingly I read books that are kind of mainstream sci-fi crossovers because they have like the weird general fiction structures, but then all the speculative elements that I love and want.
Daniel, now
So
to you.
Now, okay, my follow-up to that is, I guess, actually more of a confession or an observation about that. Is more than a question. And so I have two general rules when I review things and read things. One, I don't do poetry. because I have this block. I don't appreciate it. I've tried many times, just don't get it. 2, I don't read things in second person. And so I have very often I'll read a short story and drop it. The Locked Tomb story novels. Read the first one, adored it. Got the second one, saw it was in the second person, put it away, have never picked it up or read it again. I got this because I adored the Book Eaters and was really, eagerly anticipating. And so dug into this, and then I got to part 2 and I texted Shaun. I was like, oh no. Thinking, what am I going to do? So I put the book down, and there was a bit of time where I just didn't, read, and it was hard breaking into it. And part of the issue is I agree. I like things that challenge me or surprise me. It's just the second person has always just been like a slap. I don't want to say slap in the face like an insult, but it's been so jarring that I'm just totally torn out of the story. And I really have a hard time getting into stories often, getting them in my mind and visualizing and just not reading the words. And so I forced myself to do it with this and began to understand then why you chose to do it. And though I'll admit, I still wish there was a way it wasn't necessary. I really, kind of like you said, you started out hating it, but then you gained an appreciation of it. I would say this is the first time where I have forced myself to read it before, but this is the first time where I've forced myself to read it where I actually was like, yes, this makes sense. And overall, I don't regret it. And I enjoyed reading it. And I actually think it's an effective way of doing it. So I guess that's my feedback as someone who, like you, very soon, had that pet peeve against that concept. And I guess also, the fact that I realized then it was very soon, you realize it actually is first person, being told to a person through explaining I see you doing this, etc. I was at least then to be able to put the image in my mind of this first person figure, however I imagine that first person figure relating it, and that eased me to it. So I guess I go through all that to say to any listeners out there that are like, oh God, I'm going to stay away from this then, as a person who would feel similarly, I think it's worth a shot.
Oh, that's very kind. I'm interested to hear your thoughts on the everlasting at some point, because this is a bit craft technical, but for me, second person and first person are kind of a spectrum. And what changes is just how present the narrator is or how present the audience is. Because in first person, you are always narrating to someone, but you're not necessarily addressing them directly. In second person, they sometimes call it plural first, which, the everlasting is right in the middle there, because the guy is narrating his point of view to Una the everlasting, but she's also there. So she's kind of present, and it's more like he's saying, you, I, we. I don't know. I find it a really interesting perspective, but I have to say it doesn't work for me on a lot of books. So it is hit and miss. Harrow didn't work for me either, and I feel bad saying that. I feel like I shouldn't say bad things about other authors, but I quite liked Gideon. I didn't like Harrow. I was fine with it in Broken Binding, although for me it slightly spoiled one plot arc, but in general I quite like it. So yeah, I know it is an ask. I won't put you through that in the third book. There's no second person there.
Can I ask, when you were sitting down and writing this point of view, did you do that consciously, where you were like, I'm going to do this, or was it a thing that kind of came organically? And then did you find that it was really challenging to write in this way?
So the whole process was really difficult, I think, because after Book Eaters was kind of done, my editor approached and was saying, what's next? And what I had next for her was a bunch of half-finished novels I'd kind of tried to start. And she said, well, why don't you try something completely new? And we essentially sat down and did brainstorming. And that's not generally my process. Normally I start with a sense of what I want the story to be, where it's going emotionally. I had none of that. I just had a setting. So I basically drafted and redrafted until a book emerged. And at one point, I think I was so stuck with, I use a mix of outlines and intuitive writing. I was so incredibly stuck and just couldn't figure out a way forward. And that's when I sat down and just wrote, basically the first chapter where it switches into second person. I kind of wrote that as like a pantsed chapter. And that was just trying to get a sense for the sensory side of Hong Kong, the rural bits of it that most people don't see. And then I had to try and make it work. So it came out of a period of being very, very stuck with the rest of the novel. But it was the thing that helped me see what it could be and what it could look like, if that makes sense.
One question I had was going back to the past haunting people and people, being pain. The quote that I shared at the beginning from the book is the tagline, the idea of pain being inherited and passed on and becomes self-reinforcing in a way. There's elements of that haunting from the past and that pain and the personal aspects of the story, I think, of maybe what you drew from for the novel that are very Gothic. And it's described in terms of marketing as being like this Gothic historical fantasy or ghost story. But one of the things that is notably absent from that would be often present in the Gothic genre is romance, to, I think, the betterment of this. But I'm curious, not that I'm against romance being in things. I just think in this particular case, it makes sense to not be an element. But I was curious about if you had anything reflection on that.
Yeah. So, yeah, I think I could talk about Gothic literature for quite a while. I do like the Gothic. Actually, one of my title suggestions early on was Hong Kong Gothic, which I'm so glad we didn't go for because it didn't fit the book. And also coming out in like within weeks of Japanese Gothic would have just been horrible. Because I needed to read that book. I think that's going to look amazing. That book looks amazing to me. But anyway. Yeah, so there isn't any romance for reasons which become apparent in the story, unless you're a fan of like necrophilia and or incest, basically. So the characters involved. Yeah, I'm not a huge romance person. I'll be really honest and say that there wasn't romance in the Book Eaters when I first wrote it. There was a kind of like a suggestion of attraction because Book Eaters was written when I thought, oh, I'll have to do a series. Everyone always does series in fantasy. And then Tor was like, no, we think it should be a standalone. Is that okay? And that was great news to me. However, they then did want to move up like any romantic development into that book. And I still don't feel like I did it very well because I just don't read romance, so I just don't really know how to structure it. I don't read romantasy either. And it's not that I don't find it interesting, it's just I think there are so many other types of relationships that interest me more in terms of writing. That I see no reason for me to put in a bad romance when I could put in a really good dysfunctional family. So, because I do that better, honestly. And I think I've written about 5 books in total, but only 3 that have been or will be published. And one of them had a romantic arc in it. And I remember finishing it, looking back at it and going, oh, this is just like a total self-insertion. And I think if I write romance, it would just be that. It would just be a complete self-insertion in a way I don't want to do. So yeah, it stayed out of romance because I think there was no scope for it as well. It really fit better with just the family focus because and you know, Mercy Chan as well, she's 53, she's never married and so on. And partly that was again a scope decision. I thought if I give her a story in the context of this family, that's going to be so complicated. Obviously you've both read it and you can imagine, you know, how much more uncomfortable and complicated the story would be if she had like kids and a husband or something.
Yes.
Yeah. It simplified a lot of things because it just gave me space to develop the thing I wanted to do properly without adding clutter.
Well, there's also the relationship between Xue Yan and the man, the soldier that she rescues. That they have sort of a thing where at first I think, is there something there deeper or not? And that was one of the ones where I was thinking like, oh, is it going to go in some weird direction here? Because there's a connection between them, but yeah.
I mean, There could have been between Wing Young and Su Yin. But I think it would have been really complicated. It would have been quite traditional. If you're interested in that kind of weird romance, I don't know if you ever heard of The Ghost Bride by Yang Xi-chu. So that is based on a real practice where a living woman would be married to a dead man. And this was done because they believe that if a young man dies, he's unmarried, he goes to the afterlife, he's not got a wife, and that's a problem for wealthy families. They want him to have a wife. So they would get like a girl from a poor family, and marry her to their, like, literally like have an open casket kind of marriage ceremony. And the idea is that you're married to this ghost man, and that kind of maintains the family honor and stuff. Her version is this, ghosts are real, so this woman marries this guy, and it goes quite gothic. He turns out to be really horrible and like haunts her and stuff. But yeah, that you do get stories like that. But again, it would have been its own novel maybe. And I think Yang Xi-chu did it better than I would. So
real quick, Shaun, before you go, you have your cat there, Winston.
Yeah.
Which makes me just want to mention to readers very briefly, Mercy has a Mowgli.
No, don't steal my question.
Okay, go ahead. Go for it. Okay, you go then. Sorry. I just didn't want it to get lost.
We've been talking about lots of serious aspects of this book, but I should note, literally on page 1, you have a character by the name of Bao, which is the second book we've read this year that has Bao in it. I just want to note, this one not food. Just and I wanted to have a fun question because my cat keeps showing up, and so we have to talk about Bao, who is just a quirky little fun. I saw a review refer to Bao as like a murderous little creature, which I don't know how you feel about that description, but could you talk to us about who Bao is and why Bao is the most delightful?
I think murderous description is pretty fair for most cats, really. I think if your cat could kill you, she probably would. Bao was just, I really wanted an animal companion. So there's a dog in the next one as well. And this one, there's a cat. I thought, well, she's an exorcist, she should have a ghost cat. It doesn't really make sense, but I made it work. And I think it's one of those things where readers don't care at all whether it makes sense. They're just like, there's a ghost cat, that's fine. They don't need to know anything else. and he does feature more in kind of some of the past timelines as well. He's there as a little bit of a presence. I thought he'd be fun. I thought he also gave me an out, because some of the ghosts that Mercy faces, she's not actually physically equipped to deal with, but with a violent supernatural sidekick, she's a lot better equipped to deal with them.
I find it very interesting that, weirdly enough, Bao is not a problem to be like a ghost cat, right? Like there isn't really an issue with there being a ghost cat. But other kinds of ghostly apparitions usually are problems, like human ghosts. And I don't know if you thought about this at all when you're writing the book, but like anytime we see ghost animals, like ghost pet animals, nobody is like talking about, that's got to get exorcised too. We got to get rid of that because it's also not supposed to be here. They're almost always like presented as like they're either just things in the natural environment and nobody's bothered, like a ghost rabbit, or they're like some version of a companion. And I don't know where that disparity comes in, but I'm curious about it now.
Well, see, this is one of the areas where it possibly didn't work, but it's one of those things where most people don't necessarily know. So ghost cats are quite unlucky. They're considered to be, they are considered to be a monster. If you've seen Gremlins, they call the Gremlins Mogwai. It's the same word, Mogwai, but they spell it weird. I don't know why they pick that word. It's still weird to me. But yeah, so ghost cats are a problem, and you did used to get superstitious people who would kill dogs to create a dog ghost to deal with the ghost cat. So they weren't necessarily keen on having them around.
Well, that changes things. Why don't we see that more? I mean, I feel bad for ghost cats, but...
Well, as a microbiologist, I wonder, like, aren't there like billions and billions of ghosts like Bacillus anthracis that could like cause, anthrax if we don't exorcise them? Like, why is it just these living things have...
I'm sorry,
Anyway.
Daniel. I don't know that we're prepared to think about ghost anthrax. I just don't know.
This is what I think about.
That is very interesting. Go ahead, please. Yeah, sorry.
I was just saying, it's probably all that stuff is like from reincarnation, really, isn't it? It's like what Buddhism has borrowed from Hinduism and brought across. And
It's interesting. I didn't know, by the way. Oh no! I have to go back to the Gremlins thing. Sorry, I have to.
Okay,
I didn't know that word in the Mogwai, right, is actually like a... Because the Mogwai is not inherently a bad thing in the Gremlins movies. It's just when people do stupid things with the little Mogwai, right? But yet I guess technically the Mogwai in the story is unlucky, because how do you keep the darn thing away from food after midnight and water?
it's just a weird name choice, because Malgwai like literally means cat ghost. Like Gwai is like the ghost and Mal's cat, because they have like a the name of cats, like what they sound like. They make meow sounds, so they're Malgwai. So it is like literally, this is a cat ghost, but it's a gremlin. I don't know why. But on the other hand, they did rescue it from that Chinese guy, didn't they, or his store? So maybe he looked at it and thought, this is the closest approximation of what he can think of. Cat ghost? I don't know. It's a demon.
They didn't rescue it. They straight stole that.
They stole it. Yeah, they did. Yeah.
The guy has to come at the end of the movie and take it away, because he's like, yeah, you're not ready. Western people are not ready for this creature, and he is completely correct, because Gremlins 2 exists. I wonder if it's I wonder if it's one of those things where like they didn't really look at the word at all. They just picked a word that sounded fantastical, in like the same way where people get like, Chinese letters tattooed on their bodies, but they in no way did their due diligence to make sure it says what they think it says. So they get like, like Bunyan on their ankle or something.
Yeah, my partner and I got wedding ring tattoos. And we ended up getting them in Chinese characters, because that's his is like the first part of my name, and mine was the first his name in full. And he was like checking all the time, like, this doesn't say idiot, right? Like something. But yeah, it was an interesting choice, I guess. Malgwai, I guess, because they're just like known as a type of demon, and I was trying to get out of my mother, like, how do you define the difference between demon and ghost? And it was very hazy, and she didn't seem to really understand. And eventually she just said, like, well, you're writing fantasy, can't you just make it up? And I was trying to explain to her that you have to, yes, you can, but you have to make things up in the right way, or people on the internet will get mad at you. And she didn't really kind of understand that at all. So
that's interesting. There's got to be a cultural thing there that I, because you're right, the internet would be like, well, you didn't explain this, so like, how dare you? And then they'd write like a 9,000 page treatise about it. Whereas in a story, maybe we don't have to have everything like fully explained out. And why do we need ghosts to be like rigidly defined, like scientific beings? They're ghosts.
yeah. I mean, it's why I didn't want ghost in the title of the book, because I think ghost has a very specific connotation. Whereas like that word, it just kind of means something that's weird, which is why, like, you've probably heard the word guilo referring to Western people in Cantonese, which means like ghost man or foreign devil. And that's just because like it's still in use. Like, it used to be quite derogatory, but now I would say it's like a cheeky, like kind of slightly funny word for Westerners. But it's because when they saw Westerners, they're like, what's that? Why is it so pale? So you look like a weird kind of supernatural creature, and that's why they gave that like word guilo. So.
All right, Daniel, last question before we wrap up.
Sure. So my last question, I guess, is a broad one to this book is ultimately, I guess, from my perspective or interpretation, about generational trauma and the haunting of that. And my question, I guess, is how did you deal with coming up a resolution for that? Because generational trauma is something it just keeps perpetuating, like that wound that keeps digging down in. And so was the ending of this something that you struggled with? Is the resolution you come up with something that you started with? So I guess that would be my question of curiosity.
Yeah, I mean, it's a minor spoiler, but it's not a very combat-heavy ending. And I think I did initially go into it thinking this is how it would have to be, but I did spend a lot of time thinking about that difference where, so for example, someone said to me once, the Japanese ring and the American ring, one of the differences is that they go to great lengths in the American version to establish how innocent like the characters are and that they don't deserve this. And that means that the ring is like a monstrosity who has to be defeated, the girl in it. And that's very different from like, it doesn't matter who caused the curse, it's just become our problem. And I didn't want a combative ending because I felt like that didn't actually address the baseline issue, that the only way out of it was, you know, some type of discussion, some type of emotional resolution that enables the characters to break these cycles. So I think that was something I was looking for, and it will work for some people and not others. I think some people, possibly more rooted in genre, will expect, you know, something a bit more combative or feel like it's an easy way out. But I don't actually think that the character's work is done. I think by the end of the novel, they're just starting the hard work. So take from that what you will.
All right, we gotta wrap up. So let's start with the big question. What are you working on next that you're allowed to tell us about?
I don't think there's any restrictions, but having spent 5 years somehow on Girl with a Thousand Faces, I wrote the next book in about 8 months while edits were going on. So I actually handed that in to my editors in March, and I'm getting notes back in May. And so far, I mean, that was a little scary because I had no time for beta reads or anything. I just like yeeted this manuscript at them, and they actually really liked it more than the last two. So that was like, okay, that makes me feel better. But yeah, I'm writing sci-fi, which I don't think a lot of people know, but I guess sort of Philip K. Dick sci-fi is really my big love, I guess. I love that kind of science fiction. I pitched it to my editors as like Scanner Darkly meets Station 11, but it's probably closer to like Normal People with a slice of Fallout. I don't know. But yeah, so that book, it's set in rural Texas because, you know, all the locations have to be done that I'm from. It's near future, and it's kind of about a future America where there's been an apocalypse, essentially. You know, it's a little bit post-apocalyptic. There's been a pathogen which has been unleashed on the world, and the people who contract this disease, although they are dying, they believe they are experiencing spiritual enlightenment. So the sicker they get, the more they think they're just being lifted to another plane of existence. And there's a kind of treatment for it, which is an antibiotic controlled by the American government. And you have to take this antibiotic for months or years, and it still might not cure you. But as long as you're on it, it gives you crippling depression as its side effect. So on the one hand, you have like a fatal disease, which makes you incredibly happy and spiritual. And then you have a curative drug, which makes you depressed and miserable. And the main character is a man who's responsible for both the pathogen and the drug. So he has completely fucked up the world, and it's all his fault. And the book is about what he does with it and how you kind of like live with yourself when you have done something so unforgivable. And his kind of path, like he's kind of going on this one last journey to try and fix all the things that he has broken and destroyed. And it was just a really nice chance to write something set in Texas and some of Nevada, and just like play around with those landscapes and some of those tropes. And it's, again, a little bit of a departure, but, you know, there's a dog in it, so you can read it for that. The dog doesn't die.
Oh, boy.
You're talking about Philip K. Dick and microbiology. I don't think you could, like, pitch a better book to this audience.
Yeah, no kidding.
Like, I'm ready to read it.
Yeah.
It features phage medicine, so just so
awesome.
you're warned.
Yeah, bacteriophage therapy is perfect, yeah.
And then if folks would like to find you and your stuff, where would they go?
So the advantage to having a weird name is I'm pretty easy to find. So Sunyi Dean is just everywhere. Same website, Instagram, Blue Sky Threads. I have a Twitter account just as a placeholder, but I don't touch it because Twitter is the bad place. And I don't have a newsletter because I really can't be bothered. I don't read newsletters. I know they're good, but I don't read them, so I don't send them out. I just post things to Instagram and hope my publisher does their job. I guess.
Well, thank you very much for being here and giving us your time. We appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. It was really fun, and you guys are very funny. Good luck at the Hugo Awards this year.
Oh, they're already out. We're not on it.
Yeah, no, we're not.
It's okay. We had 4 nominations in the past. We're good. It's fine.
We scraped on once because it was like my life's ambition to go to a losers party, and because by the time I got to that, they stopped doing the losers party, so I was very bummed out. But,
no.
that might have been the year after the Dublin one.
Yeah, that was Glasgow.
Yeah.
Yes, 2023.
Yeah. I think they stopped doing the big one because there was the whole controversy thing that I don't really feel like dredging up because I don't have energy to be miserable anymore.
Yeah, let's not go there. We're supposed to be hopeful towards the end.
Yeah, I want to stay hopeful.
Yeah.
Okay, so for folks at home, if you'd like to let us know what you thought, or you've read this book and you want to let us know, obviously you should write a review if you liked the book, because that also helps the book. Please send us an email, skiffingfanty@gmail.com. We'd love to hear you. Or if you're in our Patreon Discord, there's a book and show discussion channel for you to talk about these things. You should read this book and talk about it in the Discord. Or else.
Thank you.
If you are on the internet and want to find us, we're on Blue Sky, Threads, Mastodon, all sorts of different places. And you can go find that at skiffingfanty.com/skiffythings. And then again, usually every Friday, 7 p.m. Central, we'll have our live show format at twitch.tv/alphabetstreams. And then if you have money you don't need for food and housing and medication, and you feel like giving it to us, patreon.com/skiffingfanty. That helps us pay for hosting and things of that nature. We're a non-profit venture, mostly because we don't make profits, so we don't have to think about that. Yeah. So we're definitely not profitable. We are break even. And that's the goal, honestly.
Barely,
so,
yeah.
Yeah. As for Patreon supporters, we have a whole crap load of them right now. So we'd like to say thank you to Andrea the Abiding, Cameron the Chthonic, Caroline the Benevolent, Carrie the Divine, Chris the Candescent, Dan the Transient, Daniel the Cultured, David the Debonair, Erica the Esteemed, Jeff the Gracious, Joseph the Jovial, Juan the Junctional, KB the Kind, and Karen the Kickass.
Kat the Kinematic, Matthew the Magnificent, Paul the Pious, Robert the Reliable, Robin the Bold, Ryan the Resilient, Sarah A. the Sensational, Sarah E. the Sublime, Sarah O. the Rapturous, Stephen the Strange, Tari the Thorough, Tanya the Triumphant, and Trish the Imperturbable.
Me, I'm at SeanDuke.net. I also am on the Alphabet Streams Twitch Wednesdays, Sundays, 6 p.m. Central for games and other shenanigans. And then if you just put /Duke things on my website, you'll find all of my social stuff.
And you can find me, Daniel, on the Skiffy and Fanty blog, or reading1000lives.com, or Reading 1000 Lives on Blue Sky, and that's 1000. And I now actually think I have my Instagram open. It's Bacteria Lover on Instagram, if I remember correctly.
I think it has an underscore in there, but yes.
Does it? Okay, yeah.
Yeah, Skiffy and Fanty bylaws require us to be hopeful this year. And so my hopeful thing to stay is that remember, despite the world seeming like it's constantly on fire, there are interesting books being released right now, like this one, that you can read, right? Your library will probably have books like this.
And it does have a great cover, too.
It does have a really cool cover. So you could read books like this year that'll make you happy. And so you should do that. Read more books, spend less time on social media. That's my hopeful ending.
That's good advice.
I think it is. And on that note, hopeful ending and scene.